What is going on, everyone? My name is Protolink, and in today's video, we are going to be starting I'm starting a brand new series on my channel. This is going to be a tutorial series, sort of. This first one is I'm just going to be running through a bunch of terms and whatnot. I'm going to try to keep these videos rather short, which is to say I'm going to try to keep them under 30 minutes. Most of them I'm going to try to keep within 10 minutes, but some of this stuff is going to be more extensive than that. Longer videos are going to be the harder ones to set up, or the ones that take the longest to set up, and the shorter videos are going to be the really simple ones. This one is probably going to be a super short video. The only thing I want to do is run through some of these terms that I have written down on my notebook, and a lot of these things I've just run through the resource tree on the side here, and I'll do a site map at the end here, or a program map, I should say, at the end here for LateralGM. But anyways, for a lot of these terms, I just ran down the resource tree, and I wrote down each of these, not all of these, but each of these, and defined them. So I'm going to run through them really quick, just so you know what everything is and where it's at. And I'll just do that right now, since that part won't take long. So, starting with sprites. Sprites, this by the way is if you're not familiar at all with game development. Those of you who have dabbled in it or are masters by now, this entire series is not going to be for you. This is just for people who have never done it in their lives before, and they're just starting from scratch and they just want to get into it. So anyways, sprites are just graphics, but to elaborate further, they are graphics that non-player characters or NPCs and the current player and projectiles and like objects, they're the graphics that all of those things use. Not the tiles in the background, not always anyway, but yeah, they can be, but again, not always. So sprites are basically just graphics. Sounds are just things that you hear. Now, I want to elaborate on this because a lot of people, when they hear the word sounds, they just think sound effects. But this refers to not only sound effects, but also music, background music. So there's that. Backgrounds are images that are loaded into the system that can be used as either a tile set or just a literal background for something. A path is a series of coordinates that objects can follow. I'll define objects here in a bit. Scripts are pieces of code that need to be called. Not all pieces of code are scripts, and not all pieces of code need to be called. Scripts specifically need to be called. And that is a very important distinction because they act differently. Fonts. Fonts are basically the style of text and the size. If I go ahead and create a font right here, I'll show you this to you now, but this is the only one I want to show to you at the moment. You can select the name of the font you're using, whichever font it is, like whichever typeface, and the size, and you can turn off or on anti-aliasing, make it bold or italic, and honestly, I don't know what these things do, but anyways, it doesn't matter. So that's what fonts are. Timelines are a series of alarms, and we'll get into alarms later, that objects use to perform events. So basically, you know what? I guess I will define alarms right now. Basically, alarms are timers that happen internally, and events that or rather actions that you put within an alarm event only happen once that alarm is up. So that's basically what an alarm is. And timelines are just a series of alarms that do a bunch of actions. So there's that. Objects are things that perform actions. Actions are used within events to make things happen, basically. And objects contain events that allow it to do stuff, basically. This is basically your character. Anything that moves on the screen is an object, etc., etc. Rooms are environments that contain objects. Now then, there are a few more things that I want to run through. Like I said, I've got notes. These things are not within the resource tree, but you'll be hearing me talk about them and using them quite often, so here they are. Variables are values that are assigned to something. So basically, a variable is just a word or a phrase, or in this case, I guess the technical term would be expression, that a value, like an integer or a string, which again we'll get into strings later as well, or another expression, for example, or a function is tied to, is assigned to, basically. That'll make more sense as we get into it. Constants are hard for me personally to define, but I'm just going by the wiki description, the wiki definition. It says constants constants refer to variables that are accessible everywhere but whose values cannot change. So basically what this means is you can use constants within anything, but you cannot change the value of the constant itself. Functions are the same as actions, but they are within pieces of code. So they're just actions within a piece of code. Local versus global variables. So local variables only work within the current instance, and global variables work everywhere. Now there are certain global variables that are automatically defined, but you can also define your own. So we will be doing that within the next couple of episodes here. As a quick summary before the program map, sprites are graphics, sounds are things you hear, backgrounds are images that are loaded into the game, paths are a series of coordinates that objects follow, scripts are pieces of code that need to be called, fonts are typefaces that display text that text displays as. Timelines are a series of alarms that objects use to perform events. Objects are things that perform actions using events. Rooms are environments that contain objects. Variables are values assigned to something. Constants refer to variables that are accessible everywhere but whose value cannot change. Functions are actions within a piece of code. And local variables are different from global variables in that they are only accessible within the current instance. All right, now let me get rid of this binder. Okay, so program map. This right here, all of these, this is your resource tree. Everything within here can be added to or edited, except for the basic stuff. You can't remove this, but if you right click on it, you can add extra folders, like folder 1, for example, and you can remove that if you want. So this is called your resource tree. Every single resource that you add to your game is going to appear over here, and when you use this program, you're going to want to pay attention to this. Below your resource tree, you also have your constants, which you can define yourself, although I have no idea how that's useful at the moment. I don't ever use that. This is your game information. If you double click on it, you can add this. This is basically what your user manual is. Below that is game settings, and if we double click on that, real quick, I'm gonna go through this later, but real quick, I'll just go through it, just skim through it. Basically, these are certain things that your game itself, like settings for the game itself, basically. This is not settings for the program as a whole. We're actually going to go to that next, but this is settings for the game itself. So there's that. And extension packages, it just has extension packages. I mean, whoop-de-doo. Okay, so, and also if you want to search for something, you can do so up here. So if you go to File up in the top here, and go to Preferences, this is where your Enigma or LateralGM settings are. Here you can change your theme and whatnot. Mine is set to Nimbus, which is probably why it looks different from yours. Once you set it, you don't ever have to set it again if you really don't want to. So there's that. And then the prefixes, these are for your resources specifically, from your resource tree. So if I open one of these, you'll see for a sprite, the prefix is SPR0 or SPR underscore, and as you can see, this has SPR underscore and then 0. If you edit this to, let's say, sprite underscore, if you apply, some changes require a restart. I don't know if this one will or not, so let me go ahead and do this. No, it doesn't. As you can see, it changes it to sprite underscore. So I always use SPR underscore for sprites, and if you want to copy all of these, then you can, but some of them you have to manually change anyway, like backgrounds, you might have to change it to TS underscore if it's a tile set, and sounds, you might have to change it to BGM underscore if it's background music, etc., etc. But for the most part, all of these are pretty much, what they are for me. So if you want to use the same ones that I do, go right ahead. Nobody's gonna stop you from doing that. So yeah, it's easier for me to distinguish the difference between all my resources by using these exact prefixes. So that's pretty much the biggest thing within the preferences menu. And then room editor, I'll set this to -1. You're going to want this to be -1, trust me. I don't know exactly how much it is by default because I don't remember, but yeah, you're going to want it to be -1. Okay, so that's your sitemap. In the next episode, we are going to be doing basic character stuff. We're going to set up the first character and movement and whatnot, and we're going to just do that. So yeah. Also, from the next episode onward, there might be a file to download, but if there is, it will be at a very easily accessible location. So yeah, if you do download the file, then you'll be able to follow along with me directly. So that's actually a good thing. So yeah, thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you in the next episodes.